All right, peace and blessings, everybody. It's Wednesday, November the 28th, the year 2018. And I don't want to give the mockers and the scoffers and the nattering naysayers too much airtime, but sometimes it's good to call them out. You just got to deal with them head on and show where their heart is, because you can tell that some of these people have wicked, soulless, black hearts. Godless. They're just godless people. But Christopher Moltz has never claimed to be innocent. What he said is that his sentence was way too harsh, that he was 20 years old. I mean, think about what you were doing at 20 years old, and now Christopher Moltz is 41 years old, so he has spent more of his life in prison than he has spent out of prison. And Christopher Moltz did not kill a cop. He was not present at the crime. All he had was a conversation with some people, and they went to the house, and they are the ones who performed the crime. Christopher Moltz did not plan the crime. He simply had a conversation with them. And now, at 20 years old, he's serving life without parole, which I think is a terrible sentence disparity. It's an injustice because the sentence is too long. You have people that have murdered cops that have gotten less time than Christopher Moltz. And anyway, I made a video about Christopher Moltz this morning, and this guy, Dan McGann, shows up, and I always have these people show up on my channel. If you look at Dan McGann, he's got no content. I'm sure this is a fake name. I can't even find out anything about him. So I don't know how long he's had a channel, but more than likely it's a government operative who is sent to my channel, and they constantly paint the prisoners in the worst possible light. They probably work for the Southern Poverty Law Center. But let's read this sequence of events, and then I want to read to you what Christopher Moltz has to say himself. Corey Mickey has a valid question. He shows up on the channel, and Corey Mickey says, "So is this an innocent man? I can't find a backstory." So that's an honest question, and he doesn't claim to be innocent. If you go up here and read the question from PT, he says, "Rudy, please reiterate that. He is innocent of murder. He doesn't claim to be innocent of some particular crime, but he is innocent of murder." That's what I'm saying. Christopher Moltz never intended for anybody to be murdered. He didn't plan to murder anybody, and he did not want anybody to be murdered. And he should not be serving life without parole at 20 years old. He had a conversation with a bunch of other guys, or a few other guys, and they went to rob somebody, and in the process of robbing somebody, a man was killed. Christopher Moltz was not even there. He did not tell anybody to murder anybody, and he did not plan the murder of anybody. Yet he's serving life without parole because we have a for-profit prison system. But this guy Dan McGann shows up, right? And there's always these anonymous people that are nattering naysayers. And he says he was found guilty as a conspirator before the fact. Yes, we do hold people responsible for what happens in crimes in which they participated. And this includes the planning. It's called deterrence. So I responded to this anonymous Dan McGann guy. You don't know that he helped plan anything. He had a conversation, and you used the word plan in order to paint Chris in the worst light possible. There will come a time when your own words will be used against you when judgment comes to you. Life without parole, and yet you offer no empathy with this man? There are people who have murdered cops who got less time. You always try to spin things to make the prisoners look their worst. As I said before, your own words will be used against you when your time comes. Okay, and then Dan McGann, who I believe Dan McGann is probably someone I've blocked in the past, and he keeps opening accounts. And somebody always thumbs down my video in like the first 5 minutes. It's almost like they're paid to do that. They're very good at their job because they thumbs down my video very quickly every time I upload a new video. Anyway, anonymous Dan McGann, because I'm sure that's not his real name, he says you're conflating so many different issues, such as others who kill cops get less. No, that's not conflating issues. If someone participates in the murder of a cop and they get less time than Christopher Moltz, that's comparing apples to apples. But he writes apples to oranges. I'm not spinning anything. I am showing you how you seem to be rather gullible in your assessment of the facts. Let's read from the facts, shall we? And then he quotes something that he's found somewhere, right? He's looked up some article that he's found on the internet, and he thinks he's doing some deep research. On December the 21st, 1997, police questioned Adam Davis, about the murder. Adam told police that he and Moltz had been having problems with Kaylee and his roommates, that Moltz said he could get someone to rob them, and that he and Moltz asked Frankie Davis, Adam's brother, if he knew someone who would be interested in participating in a robbery. Adam stated that Moltz had a map drawn in pencil and used it to explain the layout of the victim's house to Mont USA Pace, Otis Thomas, and a man known as Nikki. Keep in mind that all of this testimony about a map is just that. There was never a map produced in trial. There was never evidence of any existence of a map except the testimony by people trying to get a lenient sentence. Then this Dan McGann goes on to write, so it seems that Moltz was indeed involved in the planning. So he's drawn this conclusion that Moltz was indeed involved in the planning because he cut and pasted from some article he found on the internet. That's real deep research there, Dan McGann. He goes on to cut and paste. At trial, Frankie testified on the afternoon of December 17, 1997. Moltz and Adam went to Frankie's home in Hampton and asked if he or anyone he knew wanted to participate in a robbery. And then he gives some little cite of, this legal crap. And the reason I call it legal crap is because we all know that nobody gets a fair trial nowadays, and we all know the prosecutors are a conviction factory. And we know the prosecutors and the judges are motivated by financial gain for a conviction because it's a for-profit prison system. And then he says to me, cheers, mein Freund, which means I guess he's trying to be German or something. And do you not worry about your words may be used against you? And then he does a little smiley winky thing. Ironic, isn't it? And then I write back to him, you cut and paste this legal BS from the perverted trial and think it makes you look smart. Like when you criticize Daryl's grammar, you think you're being an intellectual smarty pants. The Bible talks about mockers, scoffers, and reprobates like you, who go around accusing the brethren, constantly trying to look intellectual. You don't think it's possible that others testified against Chris in attempts to get a lenient sentence? Also, there was no map ever produced in trial, only someone trying to get a lenient sentence who claimed a map existed. People lie on the stand all the time in order to get lenient sentences. They sell out their fellow man. It happens all the time. But no, you would not consider that because all you care about is justifying that Chris is spending life without parole, and he was not even there, and he had no intentions to murder anyone. He was also 20 years old at the time of the conversation. You could care less that an adolescent man, 20 years old, made a mistake and will spend his entire life in a cage because you have a wicked, black, soulless heart. I am not your friend, and when God Almighty brings judgment to you, Pharisee Dan McGann, it will be a truly beautiful thing to see you receive the judgment that you have sown with your own accusations against others. Well, you know, I sent this whole thing to Christopher Moltz, who spent the last 21 years in prison. And I just said, I want you to see what the devils are saying on my channel. Don't feel obligated to respond. But you know what? Christopher Moltz did respond, and I want you to hear it. Rudy, I just got your email where the guy is explaining his point. Well, he said, and I quote, let's look at the facts. LMAO. That was a newspaper article. LOL. We know that the news never prints anything that is not a fact. LOL. The article said that Frankie Davis is Adam Davis's brother! Exclamation point. They are no relationship. Frank is 100% African American and Adam is 100% white, not African American. LMFAO. Also, that guy thinks the facts are what a co-defendant says. So if a role was reversed and I wrote a statement saying he was the Colonial Parkway killer, that's a fact because I said it and I wrote a statement and I testified on him at court, then he would spend his life in prison without parole. That's a very good point that he's making. David Hinkson is spending 43 years in prison because of the testimony of one man named, what's his name? I forget his name. What's the guy's name? Aaron. What's the guy's name in David Hinkson's case? I can't believe I forgot his name. Wow. Joe Swisher. Sorry, man, I don't have the memory for these bad guys. Anyway, David Hinkson is spending 43 years in testimony because one guy got on the witness stand and testified, Elvin Joe Swisher. That's the only reason David Hinkson's in prison. And so the point that Christopher Moltz is making is that he's in prison because of the testimony of these guys, you know, and they'll say anything to get out of prison time themselves. Let's go on to read Christopher's message. Then he would spend his life in prison without parole. Would his opinion still be the same? There was no evidence in my case except for what the co-defendant said. No DNA, no weapons, no eyewitnesses. Just one kid saying some other kids did something. All I had to do was say that they did it, and I would be free. But like I've always said, I'm not claiming to be innocent. I'm claiming that too much time was for my conversation. Again, thank you for your support, Rudy, and everyone else that supports me. Also, Mr. Davis, I don't want you out there arguing and being upset at others for their opinion on my case. There is two sides to everything in life. No one is ever going to be on the same side ever. So please don't lose friends over me. I think what Chris may be missing is there's a devilish band of hyenas that show up at every video I make. And if I was trying to argue, you know, that, I don't know, take somebody that everybody thinks is a great guy, if I was trying to argue that Jesus was a good guy, they would badmouth Jesus, you know. Anyway, he says, so please don't lose friends over me. Just be open to what everyone has to say. You cannot please everyone. A good debate is what's needed in my situation. A good debate is what's needed in my situation because at least people are looking up on my case. Okay, I'm gone for now and I'm going to call you tomorrow. Good night, Rudy, and everyone else that's reading this. Always, Chris Moltz. So again, this man is spending life in prison without parole for a conversation. He's not claiming to be innocent. What he's claiming is that life without parole is too long of a sentence. He's 41 years old. He spent 21 years in prison, and the first 20 years of his life, was free. But, childhood and being a kid, he has spent 21 years in prison. I just think it's crazy. And I think that most rational thinking people would think that Chris has done enough time and that he should be free. I hope you'll join me in advocating for Chris, and I hope you'll write Chris a letter. Thank you for your time.